Thank you for joining the Insurance WebEx webinar today, Creating a Powerful Value Proposition That Sells. What we're talking about as it relates to value propositions is really something that's important. And I know that a lot of people on this call and probably a lot of people in business have developed a value proposition. The problem is we don't use it very often because it doesn't really work. And by the time we've cleansed it and got everyone's input and we put it through compliance and all of that, and we try it once and we're like, well, maybe that's not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be better than that. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we can develop a value proposition that's better than that, that's really something that you are comfortable using with prospects and even clients and strategic alliances. So we're going to talk about how to create that, and it's something that you certainly can do on your own, and it's something that you can certainly do after this call today. And the reason that I believe that this is so important is today we really have to change the conversation in this industry of financial services, because the problem is that we've got all sorts of messages going on around us, not created by us, but going on around us about us. For instance, whether the DOL happens or it doesn't happen exactly the way that it might have been thought, the reality is people have heard that the government feels like they need to regulate a financial advisor's ability to be in the best interest of their client when the client actually already thought you were in their best interest. It's very confusing. And if you asked one of your clients, so what is it that that financial advisor does? I wonder if they'd have something really great that they would say about you, and would they be sort of would the messages that are coming from other sides about our value, would that necessarily impede them from saying something if they didn't have something really good to say? I believe that today, more than ever before, there is an attack on financial advisors' value, and we have to change it. And we have to change it by being able to prove out and talk about what it is that we do and what this value is that we provide. Because if they just listen to some of the reports and some of the studies and some of the surveys that have been done, I mean, they all come back the same way. And we need to really focus on how we can talk about our value in a way that is powerful, that people understand why they're paying you and why they're working with you, and actually want to work with you and want to talk about what it is that you do. So if I were to ask you, what is your value proposition? It's like asking, well, what's unique about you? It's a very difficult question to answer because a value proposition oftentimes sounds like, we work with individuals and families and businesses, helping them with financial planning and investment management. And that's great, but it's not a value proposition. It's a statement of what it is that you do. It is not value. And when we start getting into, okay, so tell them why that might be important to them, or be more specific and interesting to them, that's where we run into some issues, because we go, well, what else are we supposed to be saying? What else are we can't go against compliance. We can't say things that, like we'll produce lots of performance. Of course we can say those things. So how do we say it so that it's memorable, so that somebody really can understand the value in such a clear way that they could explain it to somebody else? I think the problem is today is that we have a messaging problem. I think the biggest mistake that financial advisors make in marketing is not that they don't run enough seminars, or they don't post enough on social media, or they don't run enough client events, or send out enough emails, or it's none of those things. The biggest mistake that we make in marketing is not messaging ourselves properly to the other person so they get it. And we've proven it out. And I'll give you a case in point, just a very simple case in point. Let's say you go to a business function and someone says, oh, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a financial advisor. Does that make them want to speak with you more or less? And the answer is less, and it's less almost every time. And think about that from a very simple introduction. We are there at that business function to attract people to us. And the only thing we're doing by the power of our own words is to repel them from us. We have a messaging problem, and there is a solution. And the solution is to figure out how we can talk about ourselves in a different way where we feel comfortable. It's not gimmicky, it's not elevator statement-y. It's something that really resonates with the other person. And so it's it's a process of figuring out what those words are that we're going to use. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So there's 4 absolutes really that we need to think about as we're creating a better value proposition. And the first absolute is to understand the perception that's going on around us right now. And I mentioned that there is the things that the government is doing and all the talk about DOL and fiduciary, and the clients are very confused. But there's other things that have gone on as well about financial advisors. For instance, J.D. Powers came out with a special report basically saying that investors who have more than $1 million invested do not want to pay fees. Well, I think that the question was asked wrong, because it's not that they don't want to pay fees, it's that they don't understand what they're paying for. But this is what we're up against. They think, well, I don't want to pay fees, because no one would pay a fee if they didn't know what they're paying for. Well, you got it for this before, and you really can't see the fees coming out. So now we're going to charge you. Do I get anything more? No. We've got to be able to explain this so the clients get it, because it's not that they don't want to pay fees, and it's not that they don't want to work with a financial advisor. It's that they have to be clear about what it is that they're getting for what it is that they're paying. So I look at it this way: it's your perceived value versus your real value. We have a lot of real value, a lot of real value. The problem is the perceived value doesn't always match up with that. Like I said before, if I was standing outside of your office you were meeting with someone and that person walked outside of the office and I said, what does that financial advisor do? Just like if one of your clients were asked, what does your financial advisor do? Well, investments. And it's so much more than investments, because if it was just investments, that we can get that anywhere now. That is almost a commodity. We literally can get it anywhere. What is it about the investments that is being done, and what is it about the financial planning and the other aspects of financial services, the advice, the decision making that comes along with it? And so we've got to be specific about what this value is. So number 1 is we've got to understand where we're at and why we need to think about this. Number 2 is we really have to have a compelling story. Today, people have ADD. They literally do not listen to anyone. And you think, my clients are listening, my prospects are listening, but they're not listening. And I mean, the average attention span in the United States is 8 seconds. That literally means no one is paying attention to anyone. To anyone. We're so distracted with our phones and all these messages that are coming at us and all the noise in the marketplace. And if we're going to pay attention, it has to be something interesting. Think about the last time you had a conversation with someone, or maybe even listened to a speaker. What did you remember about that conversation? It was probably a story that they told you about something that happened in their lives, or maybe if it was a speaker, they told you a story that related to something that their presentation was about. And that's what we take away. We don't take away the laundry list of stuff. We take away the things that we can remember, and we can remember stories. So if I were to ask you, what is your compelling story? And I think it starts with taking a look at, well, what are the elements of a really good story? And I think the elements start with, you've got to have a memorable moment, something that's personal. I think that we've gone at some points into a direction where we're not necessarily talking about the personal sides of ourselves. I'm not talking about the client, I'm talking about yourself, because we've made it all about the client, which is great, except at some point they've got to have something to attach to us. And so the memorable moment is something personal that connects with them. The other thing is they have to see themselves in the story. So for instance, or at least see how that would be if they were in that story. So for instance, instead of saying, let me tell you about all the things that we do, it's let me tell you about a client we met with recently. And here were some of the things that she went through that we helped her with. And now you're telling someone else's story in a way that is real, obviously not telling their name, but you're telling a story as opposed to laundry listing it, and it really works. And then the other thing is the analogy. Let me give you an analogy of what this means. And the reason that analogies work is because we can get our arms around it. We understand the analogy, so thus we'll understand what it is that you're talking about. So what is unique and compelling about you? mean, if I were to ask you, what are the unique elements of your business? I would suggest that it's really one, if not two things that our story has to be about. And it's not about how we do financial services and we've been doing this for 35 years or we have, 200 years of combined experience. That's not the story, because that doesn't tell anybody about what they're going to get, or we could infer what they're going to get, but they might also take it the wrong way if they're only listening for 8 seconds and think, they've been in the business that long, man, they're old. I mean, who knows what they're going to think, right? So we've got to be able to take a look at everything that you bring to the table and say, what is the most memorable thing about all of these things that we do? And it's probably not the things that you would hope that it would be, because what it actually is you and the team of people that you have around you. That's unique. There is nothing else really that is 100% unique, because we have the same products essentially that we sell. The service models sound somewhat the same. Some are better, some are not so great, but they're mostly the same. And that's how it sounds to the client. No one is saying, hey, we're going to provide you really bad service. Everybody says we're going to provide you really great service. It's going to be personalized. It's going to be individualized. It's going to be all the things that everybody says. And so what is the only thing that's different in your business? And it's you. And I think it's really about answering this question: why are you in this business? Because why are you in this business starts to tell your story. Well, I'm in this business because of something that happened to me when I was a kid, or I'm in this business because of something that happened to me, to my mother, or something that happened in my life. Or maybe you happened upon this industry, but now you've stayed in this industry for 20 years. Why did you stay? What is it about this industry that has meaning for you and for your clients subsequently? So it's the answers to those questions that really start to get to what your story is, because I think although it may not be your value proposition, it's the reason that somebody might actually pay attention to your value proposition. Because if I think I'm going to be judged and this is going to be like a really uncomfortable situation to go in and see a financial advisor, it's going to be worse than going to the dentist, I don't want to go. How can we warm them up so we can share our value proposition? Well, I think you got to tell more about yourself. 80% of the reason that people choose to do business with you is because of you. So we just must give them more of you. And I know that it sometimes feels uncomfortable, or we shouldn't be talking about ourselves. And I'm not suggesting we talk about ourselves for 80% of the time, but we have to give ourselves a fighting chance to get someone to listen to what it is that we're going to say as it relates to our value proposition. And so if you answer the question, why are you in this business? The answer to that should go in the first paragraph of the summary section of your LinkedIn profile. It should go in the first paragraph of your bio. In fact, we just wrote some bios for some of our clients, and one of the things that we asked them to be able to write unique bios is, what is your, we asked this of every person in their office, what is your special skill? We're looking for something that's interesting that we can lead with, as opposed to saying we've been in this business for 30 years and have won all these awards and have these designations. Those things need to be part of a bio, but they're not the things that are going to get people to go, really? Well, that's interesting. Because the personal side is the thing that's actually interesting. So this is my story, and I'm not going to go through the whole story today, but I was raised by a grandmother that taught me everything that I know about lots of things, including football. She was a huge football fan. I was her firstborn grandchild. I spent lots of time with this woman. And when I decided to name my company Red Zone Marketing, I did it in the spirit of my grandmother. She had been passed away for a few years when I opened my company, but I decided to use that analogy to football because it was something that I cared about, because I cared about her. It wasn't really about football, it was really about my grandma. And I certainly love football, but it's because of her. And so when you call your company Red Zone Marketing, there's a few things you have to do. One, I wear red. The other is I have a football business card, and that's what you see up on the screen. Now, I have a football business card not because I'm trying to be a football player, but I'm trying to make this analogy and make this more memorable than being like a typical business card. Now, you may not be able to do this with your compliance department, but the reason I show this to you is because this defines my story. And every time I speak and every time that I am out meeting with someone, I will give them this business card, and it's the leave behind of my story. And we find that people will call us 6 months, 8 months after they've had my business card. Why? Because they just didn't throw it out. And I don't think that it's about the business card. It's about the story. It's absolutely about the story. So think about how you're telling your story. What story are you actually telling? And by the way, I just have to say in full disclosure, when you do a football business card, you've got to put your height and weight on the card. Behind weight, it says without the pads, which is a football thing. My husband, 23 years of marriage, says that it should say this week behind my weight, which isn't very nice. But the fact of the matter is, when you put your own football business card together, you don't actually get on a scale and make it accurate. I put whatever I wanted to put on there, and that's exactly what, it's not even my goal weight. It's like really far away from the real weight. Okay, so what is your purpose? Now, this also gets to that meaning, that why. What is your purpose? Now, is this some deep conversation that we're having about our purpose in life? No, it's your purpose as a financial advisor, which actually might also be your purpose in life. And now we're getting to more meaning and more interesting things about why you do what you do, as opposed to you're good with numbers or you really like, the stock market. Those kinds of things I hear all the time. It's why do you do what you do? And so I think if you answer these questions, why are you in this business? What is the most meaningful thing about this business to you? Why should someone hire you? What is it that you bring to the table? Now, you may not put this up on your website, but I think we have to be able to answer it for ourselves first. And have your staff, if you've got any staff people, have them answer this question. Why are you in this business? What is the most meaningful thing about this business to you? Why? Why do the clients like working with you? And what is your ultimate value that you bring to the table, to this organization, to your clients? And it's a helpful exercise to start to get to understand how we can talk about what it is that we do just a little bit differently. So here's an example of a summary section of a LinkedIn profile. So the summary section on a LinkedIn profile is at the very top of the profile. It is below your picture and your title. It's the summary section. And in that summary section, you really should answer the question, why are you in this business, or why are you still in this business? And there was a financial advisor we asked this question to, and he said, well, I'm in this business because of something that happened to me when I was a kid. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, we grew up very wealthy, but my father and my uncle decided that they were going to invest all of the family wealth, and his father and his uncle were renowned surgeons in Pittsburgh, decided to invest all of the family money into one steel stock in Pittsburgh. And, well, that didn't work out so well, and they ended up in a real financial situation, and they had to sell their house, and their parents got divorced, and it was this terrible situation. And in this terrible situation, that kid decided that he was going to do something to help families avoid the problems that his family were going through at that moment. And he didn't know that was to be a financial advisor, but that's what it was. And so he puts up this profile many years later. And the interesting thing is that he's working with physicians, but this kind of a profile, if you think about it, this kind of a profile actually doesn't make him a better financial advisor for physicians or for anyone. But what it does is it makes him real. And he actually works with physicians and has worked with more physicians since putting this up there. Why? Well, I think it's something like this. If a physician makes $600,000, $800,000 a year, but they haven't saved right, or they made a couple bad business decisions, they know if they go in to see this guy, there's not going to be any judgment. There's going to be no judgment in this office. And that's one of the biggest stopping points for people to go in and see a financial advisor. So think about changing your summary section of your LinkedIn profile. And if you would like me to review it, I make this offer every time that I speak, and I get some people take me up on it. Sometimes I get a lot more than others. But if you decide to change your story, email it to me. I'll review it. I'll give you some feedback. I'll tell you what I think about it. I won't write it for you, but I'll give you some feedback. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I think it's really important that we start to tell a better story, a more authentic story about ourselves. So now let's talk about the third absolute, which is the actual creation of this value proposition. But as we talk about creation of the value proposition, we have to think first about what really is a value proposition. Now, I was walking down the streets of New York. This was a few months ago, and I'm, walking very fast. It's noon on a Wednesday in New York City, and I see this sign, and it says beer special. Buy one beer at twice the price, and your second beer is free. And I stopped and I walked backwards and I pulled out my phone and I took a picture of this. You can actually see my shadow in the middle of the sign. And I thought, is this really their value proposition? Is this what they're doing? And I looked inside, and as I looked inside of the restaurant, guess what I saw? A packed restaurant. It is noon in New York City on a Wednesday. Not only was the restaurant standing, well, the bar actually was standing room only, and the restaurant had a line of people to sit down. Now, why? Do you think their food was really great? Do you think it was this fantastic value proposition? No, I think it was this. I think the culture of that restaurant, they're saying, listen, when you come here, you can have some fun. And sometimes that's what people are looking for. And I think, after working for almost 20 years with different financial advisors, there is something that your clients really like, besides you and your team. It's the culture that you've developed. But the problem is, that's what this is right here. It's this culture of this particular restaurant that people are very interested in. They want to go there. They love this. But if you think about the culture and how we share our culture, oftentimes people don't get our culture or figure it out until after they've worked with us for a little while. What if we could start to share what was great about our organization? If you feel your culture is one of those things, maybe we can start to talk about that as part of your value proposition. So let me just tell you what a value proposition is, what it's not, and then we're going to go through some examples of value propositions that are different perhaps than what you might have seen in the past. So a value proposition really is a promise of value. That's what it is. It's our promise of value. This is what we're going to do. This is valuable. This is worth something. And sometimes we even share how much it's worth. What a value proposition is not is a slogan or a tagline or a positioning statement. For instance, it's not just do it. It's not trusted financial advice. It's not your vision, our guidance. These are ones that I've just pulled from different places where people have said this is their value proposition. And it's also not what I mentioned before. We work with individuals and families and businesses, helping them with financial planning and investment management. That's not a value proposition. So what is a value proposition? Well, let's go through an example of one. It has a headline, it has 3 points that you're making, and it has a graphic. Now, the headline is sort of the overall umbrella of what the value proposition is. The 3 points are given to break up everything that you do into 3 distinct parts, as opposed to saying there's 1,050 things that we do and let me list them. It's really just talking about it in categories so that people can get their arms around it and understand it, because otherwise they feel like it's this big thing that you do and it's just investments. And it's really so much more than that. And then I believe that you need to have a graphic. And I actually believe that the graphic, it could be something that you have developed in advance, or it could be something that you actually write out. So maybe you go to a whiteboard and you write out what your value proposition is. Why would you do that? It seems kind of unprofessional, right? Why wouldn't you have it printed on some nice slicked up brochure? Well, the problem is that people actually will listen to you, believe you, and absorb the information more if you are writing it down while you're talking about it. And what will happen is if you're writing it down while you're talking about it, they might start writing it down while you're talking about it. And it's just a way to get them to remember it a little bit more. A slicked up brochure basically says, I'm trying to sell you something, here's what it is. And that's not what you're trying to do, but sometimes that's what really, really great marketing materials have the impression of doing, especially in these initial meetings with prospects and clients. So the headline on this particular, this is a financial advisor that manages over $1 billion. And what he says is this. He says, what I provide is investing redefined. We plan for life-changing outcomes. And then he starts to draw this out. He draws one circle and he says, the first thing that we do is outcome-based planning. And he writes outcome-based planning in this circle. He says, now let me tell you a little bit about what we do and why outcome-based planning is so important. And then he starts to write down some key words inside of that circle. Things that, he's talking about, he's proving out this is why outcome-based planning is so important. We integrate everything in your life. We take a look at these risks that maybe you didn't even know you have. We help you figure out your goals and plan for those. And he says, now what we do under outcome-based planning is worth about 1% of your assets under care. He says, now the second thing that we do is investment management. And then he talks about what they do as it relates to investment management. He talks about their institutional level research, asset allocation, how they have triggers if they're going to make changes in the accounts, what triggers those changes that will happen in the account. Talks about everything they do under investment management, talks about why it should be important to them. And then he says, now what we do under investment management is worth about 1% of your assets under care. And he writes the number 1 down. He says, now the third thing that we do, and it's really what we bring to the table, is Team Alpha. Now you may not know what Team Alpha is, but let me explain to you a little bit about the team that we've assembled here at our firm. And he talks about their credentials and he talks about their experience. He doesn't say, well, we have a CFP in our team. He says, we have someone who has the Certified Financial Planning designation. Let me tell you what that is. Let me tell you that she studied for 2.5 years to get this and how this benefits our clients today. And he talks about the experience of the different people on the team, but he doesn't say, we've got 200 years of experience. He says, for instance, about himself, well, I've got 20 years of experience in this industry. And with my 20 years of experience, I've been through 13 major downturns of the market. What I do with clients is I help to protect assets because I am very experienced in protecting client assets. And then he talks about either the Vanguard study or the Russell study that proves out that you're worth at least 3%, if not 4%. And he's talking about why, the behavioral management and the behavioral finance and all of that. And he says, now what we do under Team Alpha is arguably worth at least 1% of your assets under care. And then he says, now I know that it looks like we might charge 3%, but our actual average fee is about 1.3%. And then he asks the key question. He says, do you have any questions about our value? And the answer that he gets, according to him, every single time is no. No, I don't have any questions about your value. I get it. There's 3 things that you do. You've written it out. I've taken some notes. I get it. And these things are individually worth something, when is all they thought probably before they came in to meet with you that they were paying for the investment management. And they're paying for a lot more than that. So it kind of looks like this when you're done. You can just have, these are the 3 things that we do. And we've had, there's a lot of advisors actually today who are doing many more WebExes or webinars like we're doing today with their clients and with prospects that maybe they never meet, or they don't, they a referral from somebody that lives across the country, and they may be going through this via a webinar with someone. And it's okay to do that. It's better if you're drawing it out, but as you're doing it kind of like I did it today. And by the way, if any of you want these slides, you can just email info@redzonemarketing.com and we'll send you these slides, and you can have them and use them, change them, do whatever you would like to do to them if you would like to use this example yourself. Now here's another example of a value proposition, and I'm not going to go through this in terms of exactly how this advisor goes through it, but it has the same idea. It's from complexity and disorganization to integration. He's talking about how all of these things, what he does, his value is to bring all of these things together. And then he talks about the integrated planning, the wealth optimization, the ongoing advice, and intellectual capital. But he's really talking about all of these individual pieces that are that make up someone's financial life, and how he helps to put it together. And he talks about the outcomes and how it feels and the confidence when you get everything put together and you kind of put all these puzzle pieces together. And he talks about how he does the heavy lifting on this. And so it's just another example of how someone can talk about their value proposition in this way. You could talk about it, with fees or without fees, but in this case, he's really using these examples and these graphics, and then he's going through the three things. So you can do it in a lot of different ways. But the key is you really want to be able to go through these examples in a way that's memorable. And graphic makes it memorable. That's why we say a headline, 3 points, and a graphic. And it used to be that a value proposition didn't have to be all of those things. But if we want to have it memorable, a headline, a graphic, and 3 things really makes a difference. We also have seen a lot more capabilities decks being done. Now, a capabilities deck in the olden days, they were pitch decks, but today we call them capabilities decks because they're not designed to pitch anybody anything. They're designed to share your capabilities, share your value. And so I have an example here of one capabilities deck, and it basically goes through 5 things that this firm, the purpose, the differentiation, solutions, intellectual capital, and outcomes. But he also talks about the 3 ways that they help. We help through consulting, through investment management, through risk management. And so he's still using that 3 things that we do as a part of this capabilities deck. And a capabilities deck is anywhere between 5 and 15 slides. It's not supposed to be 50 slides. It's supposed to be really a description of what you do, and it's that value proposition a little bit deeper. So we've seen a lot of these being done lately because it's just another way to keep people's attention. If you're talking to somebody, you think they're listening, but it's hard to absorb these things that are all things financial. The graphics really, really help. So the 4th thing we'll talk about today is using your message. So how do we take this value proposition? How do we take what it is that we're doing and turn it into something that's not just, okay, well, we're going to draw this out in our office. Is that the only place that it's going to be? There has to be some consistency to your message. If you figure out what those 3 things that you do, and maybe it's 4 things or something like that. We do have some clients that are using quadrants, talking about 4 things. But when you're talking about using your message, you really want to make sure that there's consistency across all of your messages. And that includes, with prospects, with strategic alliances, with clients. You're telling the same story all the time. And not just you, the people in your office are also telling the same thing all the time. And there should be a way of describing what you do. Now, if you're at a lacrosse game for your daughter's lacrosse or something, you may not draw out the 3 things that you do, but you might say it. You might talk about it a little differently. And so I think we have to be ready to be able to say these things. And winging it is, a lot of advisors I work with are so adept at being able to wing it because you're just so good at being in front of people and being confident and all of that. But the key is we can use all of those attributes and even be better if we really plan out what we're going to say and why we are going to say these things. So it's really the consistency of the messaging. Now, I'm just going to put up a few websites here so you can see that these are some websites where they're actually making a statement that ties directly into their value proposition. Now, they're not going to put up on their website, here's the 3 things that we do. They may not do it that same exact way, but they are making sure that the words they're using are tying into they're not just saying we do financial planning, welcome to our website. I see that all the time. What is the statement that you're making? And sometimes we make the statement in a way that is written so it doesn't sound like what everybody else is saying. I mean, this particular website, they're saying things here that are not typical financial advisor words. Why are they using those? I imagine they're using those because they actually stand out. I'm not expecting to see these words when I go to a financial advisor's website. Sometimes we have to do those things and then make sure that it's coordinating back to what are the things that we bring to the table that we believe are the most valuable. And here's another website. They're making a definitive statement about what they do and why they do it. And they're talking about fiduciary standard and other things like that, but they're saying some things that tie directly into their value proposition. And it has to be something that is memorable, and the only way to get something that's memorable on a website today is to make a definitive statement or to make a bold statement. We changed everything. That's a pretty bold statement. I don't know if they changed everything or not, but that's a bold statement. And I think we have to start to be okay with making more bold statements so that we can get people interested enough so they can hear out our entire value proposition. And so things like this, you may put up on your website, you may have in your capabilities deck, you may have it in your brochure, but I think that the way you do it might be a little bit differently in person. But if we're using the same words and we're talking about the same things, it really makes a difference. And people are going to look at you online, and they're going to look at you online because they've heard something about you. Whatever they heard about you needs to tie back into what they're seeing online. And by the way, this example that I have up on the screen is one of the very best referral tools I have ever seen, besides, of course, asking, because asking for referrals obviously works. But when you think about doing it this way, if you're talking to your client and you say to a client you've had for 15 years, let me remind you of the 3 things that we do. Let me remind you of the 3 things that we do. And then you go through this exercise with them, and maybe you take 5 minutes just sort of explaining these are the things that we've done for you. And this is the value of it. It's good for retention. It's good for your fees and being able to justify your fees. And it's really good for referrals, because if your client could actually say what it is that you do, if they could remember these 3 things and share it with somebody else, it would be a lot better than what they probably say now is, well, you should go see my advisor. She's real smart. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to move my $5 million because she's real smart. What is it that she's going to do for me? And if our clients can get better using the words, and we have to give them the words in a lot of cases, because as I said many times, they just think we do investments. And again, this is something that this example could be up on your website. It could be in a presentation. It could be in all sorts of different things. And your LinkedIn example, this has to be consistent with what it is that your value is. If your value is, if your value proposition is really heavily on the team alpha side, which I think everyone's should be, on that intellectual capital, this is our team, this is what we bring to the table, this is what I bring to the table. That's why this LinkedIn profile and the bios need to be consistent and really powerful. Because if you're making this definitive statement about your team, yet somebody goes to your LinkedIn profile or goes on your website and sees something that doesn't seem so definitive, we're losing out. We're really losing out. Again, we're talking about that real value versus perceived value. And when we're in front of somebody talking about our real value, we've just got to make sure that there's consistency across the board. Capabilities decks as well. So I believe that success is about executing on the red zone moments. So what are red zone moments? I think we're all in the red zone right now. We literally live in the red zone. We've got clients who love us. They're referring to us. We've just got to make sure that we're able to capture that advisors that are out all over about financial advisors. If any of you would like some of these things, what I have, and I can give these things to you, we have a messaging worksheet which helps you go through and figure out how to message your value, how to do things like answer the question and someone says, what do you do? Well, what am I going to say? This messaging worksheet helps you walk through that. We also have a 10 things you can do to improve your website. And I'll give you the overview. It talks really about some of the things you can do inexpensively, if not for free, to be able to change and make your website more powerful to match with your true value. And then if anyone wants these presentation slides, you can go to info@redzonemarketing.com, or you can go to redzonemarketing.com and we can get all of that to you. So a couple things about Red Zone Marketing and what we do. If you wanted someone to write your story, I think you could write it yourself. You know it, you could write it yourself. But if this isn't your expertise area or you don't have the time to do it, we do this all the time. We help with your story, your value proposition. It starts with your strategic business and compelling value proposition. We do the message, we do the graphics, we do the 3 points. We typically charge $2,500 to do that. But through June 12th, 2017, we are offering a discount of $400. And that's a significant discount because we spend a lot of time on this. We spend time interviewing you. We spend time interviewing your team. We really want to understand what this is so we can put it together. This isn't some exercise we do in 10 minutes and send it back to you. This is a serious proposition that we put forward. Now, like I said, you could do it yourself. But if you'd like us to help you with that, we do have a discount right now for Insurance WebEx viewers. The other thing is that sometimes people just want different things. Maybe they don't need that value proposition, but they need website messaging or they need a capabilities deck. And we do all of those things, and also offering a discount of 15% for those things through June 12th, 2017. So if you're interested, again, info@redzonemarketing.com. If you want some of the free stuff we've got, info@redzonemarketing.com is the email address. And then you can go to our website and find we've got all sorts of free things on our website too that you can download. And I really appreciate you guys listening in. And if you have any questions for me directly, you can email and I will answer. I will respond to you directly. If you want to send me your updated LinkedIn profile, or you want me to take a look at your website and do a review of that, we can absolutely do that. Just reach out to me and I would be happy to do that. No, I'm not going to charge you unless you want to pay. I'm not going to charge you. If we do work, then that's something different. But I really want to help. This is my industry too. I feel like we've got to have a better way of describing what it is that we do and how valuable it is because of the attack that's happened on value for financial advisors. So thank you so much for listening in.